The theater lights dimmed, and for a brief second, the room fell into a silence so deep it felt like everyone was holding the same breath. Before you even realize it, you're already leaning closer to the screen, wondering why this moment feels different. And before the story unfolds any further, let me say this: if you believe music can heal, surprise, and change lives, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this deserve to be shared with the world. No one expected much when he walked onto the AGT stage. Not because he looked unkind or unprepared, but because he looked ordinary. He wore simple clothes, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if he had spent most of his life trying not to take up too much space. When Simon Cowell asked his name, his voice trembled just a little as he introduced himself. He spoke about where he came from, a small town where dreams often stay trapped inside people's hearts because there's no room for them to grow. He talked about working long hours, about family responsibilities, about how music was the one thing that made him feel alive when everything else felt heavy. The judges nodded politely, but you could sense it, the unspoken question in the room: another singer, another dreamer, another Elvis song. When he said he would sing Elvis, a ripple passed through the audience. Elvis songs are legendary, almost untouchable. Everyone has heard them. Everyone has an opinion. Some smiled nervously, some looked skeptical, and Simon leaned back in his chair with that familiar expression that says he's heard this before. Even the singer seemed aware of the weight of his choice. For a moment, he closed his eyes, not dramatically, but like someone whispering a quiet prayer. Then the music began. The first note changed everything. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was soft, fragile, and so full of emotion that the room seemed to shrink around it. This wasn't someone trying to imitate Elvis. This was someone telling his own story through an Elvis song. His voice carried pain, hope, loss, and love all at once. Each word felt lived in, like it had been carried for years before finally being released on that stage. The audience stopped shifting in their seats. Phones lowered. Smiles faded into stunned expressions. Something real was happening. As the song continued, memories surfaced in his mind, singing quietly as a child so no one would laugh, practicing late at night after exhausting days, being told that music wasn't a real future. Every note was a response to every doubt he'd ever heard. His hands shook, but his voice grew stronger, as if the fear was slowly losing its grip. The judges glanced at each other, surprised, almost confused, because this was not what anyone expected. This Elvis song didn't sound like the past. It sounded like a confession. Halfway through the performance, the emotion in the room became overwhelming. You could see it in the audience, people wiping tears, strangers holding hands, faces softening as the song reached places words usually can't. One woman in the crowd pressed her hand to her chest, as if the voice on stage had reached straight into her own story. That's the power of moments like this. You come to watch entertainment, but you end up seeing yourself. Simon leaned forward now. His skepticism was gone, replaced by intense focus. He wasn't judging anymore, he was listening. The other judges sat frozen, afraid to interrupt the magic unfolding in front of them. The singer's voice cracked slightly on a high note, not from lack of skill, but from emotion, and somehow that made it even more powerful. It was imperfect in the most human way possible. As the final notes approached, the singer opened his eyes and looked out at the audience. For the first time, he stood taller. It was as if singing this song had reminded him of who he really was. When the last note faded, there was a split second of silence, then the room exploded. The audience rose to their feet, applause crashing like a wave. Some were cheering, some were crying, all were moved. The singer stood there, stunned, tears streaming down his face. He hadn't come expecting this. He had come hoping, quietly, that maybe someone would listen. The judges' feedback was emotional, heartfelt, and honest. They spoke about authenticity, about courage, about how music isn't about perfection but about truth. Simon admitted that he hadn't expected to be moved, and that confession alone said everything. But the most powerful moment wasn't the applause or the praise. It was the realization on the singer's face that his voice mattered. That his story mattered. That years of doubt had led him to this one moment of connection. Win or lose, he had already succeeded, because he had been heard. As the lights dimmed again and the stage cleared, the energy in the theater lingered. People walked out quieter than they came in, carrying something new inside them. A reminder that sometimes the songs we think we know still have the power to surprise us. That sometimes the most ordinary-looking people carry the most extraordinary voices. And that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about stepping forward even when you're afraid. If this story moved you, if that unexpected Elvis song reminded you why music matters, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every subscribe helps us bring more stories like this to light. Remember, you never know whose voice will change your day, your mood, or even your life until you stop and truly listen. The lights inside the theater dimmed slowly, not all at once, but in a way that made the moment stretch longer than expected. The kind of silence followed that doesn't feel empty, it feels heavy. The audience didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness something they would remember for years. Something that would stay with them long after the applause faded. And before this journey goes any further, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because moments like this don't happen every day, and stories like this deserve to reach every heart that needs them. He stood alone at center stage, a single figure surrounded by a sea of lights and shadows. From a distance, he didn't look like someone about to make history. He looked like someone who had spent his whole life being overlooked. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him, fingers interlocked as if holding himself together. When the judges asked his name, he answered softly. When they asked where he was from, he spoke of a place most people had never heard of, a town where dreams are often whispered instead of spoken out loud. He explained that music had always been his escape. As a child, he sang quietly so no one would tell him to stop. As a teenager, he sang to survive loneliness. As an adult, he sang to remind himself that he was more than his struggles. Life hadn't been kind to him. Responsibilities came early. Dreams were postponed again and again. Still, music never left him. Even when he doubted himself, even when the world seemed uninterested, music stayed. Then came the question that changed the air in the room. What will you be singing today? He paused. Just for a second. Long enough for the audience to lean in. An Elvis song, he said. You could feel the reaction instantly. Elvis. The name alone carries expectations. Legends. Comparisons. Risk. Some people smiled politely. Others raised their eyebrows. A few exchanged looks that said, this could go very wrong. Elvis songs have been sung 1,000 times on that stage. Some great, some forgettable. The judges prepared themselves for something familiar. But no one, not the judges, not the audience, not even the singer himself, was prepared for what happened next. The music began gently, almost like a whisper. And then his voice entered. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't try to impress. Instead, it reached out. It wrapped itself around the room like a memory you didn't realize you were still holding on to. The tone was different, raw, fragile, honest. This wasn't an Elvis impersonation. This was a man telling his life story through an Elvis song. The first verse felt like a confession. His voice carried pain that couldn't be faked, emotion that couldn't be rehearsed. Every word sounded like it had been lived, not learned. The audience stopped breathing without realizing it. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman wiped tears from her eyes before the chorus even arrived. As he sang, images from his life flooded his mind. Late nights alone, humming melodies to drown out doubt. Being told to be realistic. Being told that dreams don't pay bills. Being told that talent isn't enough. Each memory pressed against his chest, and instead of breaking him, it fueled him. His voice grew stronger, deeper, more certain. The judges' expressions changed one by one. Curiosity turned into surprise. Surprise turned into disbelief. Simon leaned forward, eyes locked on the stage, no longer searching for flaws but absorbing every note. This was not what anyone expected. This song didn't sound like the past, it sounded like survival. The chorus arrived, and with it, the emotional core of the performance. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from truth. The kind of crack that reminds you the person singing is human. The kind that makes the words hurt in the best way. The moment the lights began to dim, something inside the theater shifted. It wasn't dramatic, not sudden, but slow enough for everyone to feel it happening. Conversations faded. Movements stopped. Even the air felt heavier, as if it understood that something important was about to unfold. No one knew why this moment felt different, but everyone sensed it. And before this story goes any further, before the first note is sung, before a single emotion breaks free, if you believe music has the power to heal, surprise, and change lives, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this don't come often, and when they do, they deserve to be heard. He stood alone at center stage, surrounded by lights brighter than anything he had ever known, yet he felt smaller than ever. The stage stretched out beneath his feet like unfamiliar ground, polished and unforgiving. The audience beyond the lights was invisible to him, a sea of shadows filled with strangers who had no idea who he was, where he came from, or how long it had taken him to stand exactly where he was standing now. His hands trembled slightly, not enough for others to notice, but enough for him to feel it. His heart beat louder than the music that hadn't even started yet. When Simon asked his name, his voice came out quieter than he expected. Not weak, but careful. Like someone who had learned over time not to speak too loudly, not to ask for too much attention. He shared where he was from, a small town that most people would never visit, a place where dreams didn't disappear, they just stayed hidden. He talked about his life, about work, about responsibility, about how music had always been there for him even when everything else felt uncertain. His words were honest, but restrained. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply telling the truth. The judges listened politely. They had heard thousands of stories like this. Hard lives. Big dreams. Long journeys. The audience nodded along, sympathetic but guarded. Experience teaches you not to expect too much too soon. Then came the question that always changes everything. What will you be singing today? There was a pause. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he understood what the answer meant. He knew the risk. He knew the expectations. He knew the comparisons that would come the moment he spoke the name. Still, he lifted his head slightly and said it. An Elvis song. A quiet reaction rippled through the room. Not loud enough to be rude, but strong enough to be felt. Elvis. A legend. A voice that defined an era. A name that carried weight, memory, and almost impossible standards. Some people smiled. Some shifted in their seats. Simon leaned back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Elvis songs had been sung here before. Some good. Some bad. Most forgettable. Even the singer felt the doubt pressing in around him. For a brief moment, he wondered if this was a mistake. If he should have chosen something safer. Something less iconic. Something that didn't invite comparison. But it was too late now. And maybe, deep down, he knew it had always been Elvis. Those songs had carried him through nights when sleep wouldn't come. Through days when hope felt distant. Through moments when music was the only thing that reminded him who he was. The music began softly. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough to create space. Then he sang. The first note didn't demand attention. It invited it. It wasn't polished in a way that felt rehearsed. It was raw, fragile, and full of something that couldn't be taught. The sound of his voice didn't try to imitate Elvis. It didn't chase power or theatrics. Instead, it carried emotion so real it felt almost intrusive, like overhearing someone's private thoughts. Something changed instantly. The audience stopped shifting. Phones lowered. Faces softened. The room leaned in without realizing it. This wasn't a performance. This was a confession. As he sang the first lines, memories surfaced in his mind, singing quietly as a child so no one would tell him to stop, humming melodies under his breath while working long hours, being told again and again that music was a hobby, not a future. Each word he sang felt like a response to every doubt he had ever carried. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from truth. The judges felt it too. One by one, their expressions changed. Curiosity replaced skepticism. Surprise replaced expectation. Simon leaned forward, elbows on the desk now, eyes locked on the stage. This was not what he had anticipated. This was not just another Elvis cover. This was something personal. The song continued, and with it, the emotion deepened. His voice grew stronger, not louder, but fuller. As if each note was giving him permission to exist exactly as he was. The chorus arrived, and it hit the room like a wave. Not overwhelming, but undeniable. The kind of sound that reaches places people don't talk about. Somewhere in the audience, someone wiped away tears. Someone else held their breath. Strangers felt connected by a voice they had never heard before. Halfway through the song, his voice cracked. Just slightly. Not enough to break the melody, but enough to reveal the human being behind it. That moment, imperfect, unplanned, was the moment the room truly surrendered. Because perfection can be impressive, but vulnerability is unforgettable. He closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself, then opened them again and looked out at the crowd. For the first time, he wasn't hiding. For the first time, he wasn't bracing for rejection. His shoulders straightened. His stance shifted. He wasn't just surviving the moment anymore. He was living in it. He remembered every time he almost gave up. Every audition he didn't attend because fear won. Every night he told himself he was being unrealistic. Every voice that said, "People like you don't make it." And yet, here he was. Singing an Elvis song on the biggest stage of his life. Still standing. The final verse approached, and the energy in the theater became fragile, like glass. His voice softened again, drawing everyone closer instead of pushing them away. The last note lingered, hanging in the air longer than expected, trembling with everything he hadn't said. Then silence. A heartbeat passed. Then another. And suddenly, the room exploded. The applause wasn't polite. It wasn't routine. It was emotional. People stood up without thinking. Some clapped. Some cried. Some covered their mouths, overwhelmed by what they had just experienced. The singer stood frozen, tears streaming down his face, microphone still in his hand, as if he couldn't quite believe it was over. The judges spoke, but their words felt almost secondary to what had already been said through music. They talked about honesty. About courage. About how rare it is to hear a voice that doesn't just sing, but speaks. Simon admitted that he hadn't expected that kind of performance. That admission alone carried weight. But the most powerful transformation happened quietly. The man who walked onto that stage unsure of his worth was no longer the same man standing there now. He hadn't just been heard. He had been understood. And that changes something deep inside a person. As he walked off the stage, applause still echoing behind him, he carried something new within himself. Not fame. Not victory. But belief. The understanding that his voice mattered. That his story mattered. That sometimes, the songs we're most afraid to sing are the ones the world needs most. And for everyone watching, whether in that theater or through a screen, this moment left behind a message that stayed long after the lights went out. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never judge a voice before you hear its truth. And never let fear convince you that your dream is too small or too late. If this story touched you, if this unexpected Elvis song reminded you why music matters, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because somewhere out there, another unheard voice is waiting, and your support helps make sure it's finally heard.